Hello, fans and fantasy heroes. My name is TB Skyn, and there's another one. They did another animated short, so now we have to do this again because, I mean, I'm not complaining, but I am a little surprised that this thing showed up out of nowhere all of a sudden. Except, well, it didn't show up quite out of nowhere, because Riot actually told us that they were producing this thing. Well, in so many words. Back in January of this year, aka 14 billion years ago, Riot put out a video called Universe in 2020, where they talked about the fact that they were producing a series of animated shorts set in the League of Legends universe. And the teaser they showed us at the time was Shen and Akali fighting a Brambleback, both in the physical realm and the spirit realm, and they were doing some kind of master-student lesson thing. That was the teaser they showed us. So that was kind of the animated short that at least I was assuming would be the first one to show up. But no, in this case, it's Demacia, and the reason why it's Demacia seems to be that it's a tie-in. Like, much like the animated launch trailer for Legends of Runeterra was meant to promote that game, this seems to be at the very least tied in with promotion of Legends of Runeterra, much more than promotion of League of Legends, the game in and of itself. And the reason why I think so is because the Legends of Runeterra official YouTube channel has also been posting Demacia-focused content. They did a little champion spotlight for Lux. They did a region spotlight for Demacia itself. And so it seems like there's some brand synergy stuff going on there in terms of how they're working. That would be my reading, anyway. Right, so let's actually get into talking about the thing. But before we do, one little bit of recognition that I feel like is important. This is a production from Studio Axis. It's another outsourced contract piece of work that Riot basically found an animation studio and worked with them and like had their internal animators and lore experts consult with them, but it's an outside production. And the reason why I bring that up and I try to make a point of that is that oftentimes in the games industry, exactly who is doing the work, the creative work, can sometimes get a little bit obscured because, well, those animated teasers and trailers come out on the official video game YouTube channels, and sometimes it's easy to mistake them for in-house productions, which oftentimes they're not. These are working animators who have done, as you can tell from this animation reel that I'm showing you right now, a ton of work for a ton of like major franchises and a ton of film productions and stuff like that. Just wanted to recognize that the excellent work that we're about to look at is courtesy of them. So, the structure of this short is that these two kids are watching Garen and Fiora do their practice stuff and be famous hero Demacians, and they're fans of those famous heroes, so they try to reenact some of their best moves in sort of a playful fantasy sequence while they're running around with practice swords. And eventually, Garen and Fiora walk in on them. And we have this heartwarming little, oh, the heroes are being nice to the kids because they're nice people kind of thing. And Garen and Fiora get to play off of each other a little bit with their personalities, where Garen is like, haha, you keep at it, little children. And Fiora is like, you will suffer death and destruction, and your arms will be torn from your body, and you shall die in disgrace unless you seek excellence. Like, she refuses to sugarcoat the reality of being a soldier. As like, there's a little bit of that classic thing going on. And then Garen and Fiora run off to fight an actual real dragon instead of the fantasy dragon that the kids have been sort of imagining. And the reason why I bring up the structure here is just to give you a sense of what this piece of animation is supposed to do. Because as we talked about with the launch trailer of Legends of Runeterra, different kinds of animation, different aesthetic choices serve very different purposes. So the launch trailer for Legends of Runeterra was this moving painting with these extreme larger-than-life epic tableaus and Darius's amazing cape flying around everywhere and giant monster, like it was this epic tableau of all the amazing experiences that the advertisement would like you to believe that you can have in Legends of Runeterra. This is something very different. This is a character piece, and the characters in question are, well, these two adorable little kids, and Garen and Fiora. And the short is about exposing you, well, specifically it's about exposing you to Garen and Fiora's personality. It's about raising their profile as characters, but through their interaction with these kids who are, to the best of my knowledge, never actually named. Now, there's a little bit of a... I saw some people on Twitter sort of initially misrecognized that this was Garen and this was supposed to be Lux, and this was like when they were kids and they were training to be part of the Demacian army, because the short is called Before Glory, so something along those lines. That's not happening, because like the very first two recognizable characters we see are actually Garen and Fiora. They're right there, so it's not a fake out on that level. But anyway, some interesting things, like to me it's kind of interesting that the very first thing we see in this short is a shot where, well, we can't see like the subjects of the shot theoretically should be Garen and Fiora, but this is also an establishing shot of the location, which you know because it tells you the location at the bottom of it. But it's interesting to me that the very first thing we see is these two soldiers in the foreground sparring, because that also sets the mood a little bit. Like, that helps tell you, okay, this is training ground, there's soldiers, armor, swords being thrown around. You know exactly what's happening. And one thing, by the way, we should probably mention at some point is that this is the very first time, and I do mean the absolute very first time,
How does she do those moves?
that this has happened.
Close to glory.
Decent footwork. Need to watch your guard, though. You think they're ready to join the Vanguard?
Well, they certainly know the flashy stuff.
So, this may come as a bit of a surprise. It certainly came as a surprise to me, because in my head I didn't think that this was so, but no, this is actually the first animated short that Riot has, I believe, ever put out that has lip syncing in it. Now, it's not the first one with, like, dialogue or spoken, like, stuff, voiceover spoken over the animation, but it's the first time we've had, like, characters talking to each other and having dialogue, and it's the first time any of the champions have been doing it. And part of the reason for that is that once you introduce lip syncing, obviously translation becomes an issue, because like lip syncing doesn't necessarily work across languages and stuff like that, which is why sometimes it's cheaper and easier just to, when you do a trailer and a thing like that, like indeed we saw in the Legends of Runeterra trailer, to just have the voiceover without a speaking character on screen, so that you don't have to deal with any of that nonsense. And also so that you can avoid having to hire back, so that your production isn't dependent on being able to hire back the original voice actors for these characters, which sometimes can be difficult to impossible. In this case, they did manage to get both of them back, both Garen and Fiora's original voice actors. Presumably, that will have been recorded around the same time as they did, like, all the other Legends of Runeterra stuff. That certainly seems like the plausible explanation. But this is pretty much the first time that we've had this, like, a short where the characters are just interacting and doing character stuff, rather than, as in the, what's it called, Awaken? I can't remember what that cinematic is called, but the Lux Garen fighting Silas Demacia blah blah cinematic, that one, that was not really a character piece. That was like an extended action scene with a little bit of character drama underpinning it. Here, the short is about characters talking to each other, relating to each other, interacting with each other, which also creates very different needs of the animation. You will remember, for example, that in the Lux Silas Garen short thing, one thing I criticized it for was not having very expressive character animation, really. Like, it was something that I kind of took it to task for, and that's very much not true here, as we shall see, for example, this lovely sequence where Fiora has been telling the kids, the glory will never save you from a painful death on the battlefield, little ones. And you can see her expression, like she's staring off into the middle distance, completely absorbed in her little rant here. And then Garen comes in like, Fiora, with his Superman pose, smug. And then Fiora's like, oh, right, reality. Do you want me to sugarcoat it? And look at all the, like, there's so much good character animation going on in Fiora's face here. Especially the way they use the eyes. Like, take note of that. Because we start, like I said, in the middle distance, absorbed in fantasy. Here. Garen speaks, then she does a double blink. Because she comes out of her reverie, right? Like, see, oh, right, I'm actually talking to human beings who are here. And not just to myself. And it's like, oh, right, the Killjoy's there. And then notice the movement of the mouth. how the mouth, like, it goes from being very centered to she actually kind of moves it to the side of her face a little, like speaking out the side of her mouth, basically, which also gives you, like, the sense of, like, this is an aside, like, ugh, do you want me to sugarcoat it? Like, that, it gives you the mood of how she's talking to Garen here, which is a very familiar, a very non-deferential mode of speech, because, of course, they're friends. Like, they are friends and battle partners and compatriots, and they have an informal tone with one another, and that comes across in the kind of eye-rolly, yes, to stop being such a killjoy, and that little head bob, like that one right there, where she's literally telling him that he brought the mood down by giving him a down nod of her head, which is so good. And then here they hear the actual dragon showing up. And again, the eyes signal it for Fiora. The eyes move and then the head follows. A basic character animation, but ooh, it's very good. It works. And then they share this moment of recognition with each other because they don't need words. They are hardened battle partners. Just do a nod, and off we go. Anyway, that's very far ahead of everything else. So let's go back to the beginning. And one thing I want to have you notice immediately is the light. Take note of the color of the light here. This is primarily, like, it's slightly yellowish, but this is primarily white sunlight. It's bright sunlight, middle of the day. It's natural light. It's kind of harsh, but not like sharp or cruel or anything, but it is like bright natural light. Why is that important? Well, you'll see in a minute. Because as our would-be Garen Crownguard launches himself into his fantasy, note the light. That's a very different light. It's a very different color temperature. It's a very different kind of light than what illuminates the real scene. This is golden sunlight. This is the light of glory, basically. This is the light of his imagination. Everything in here is fantastical. He's like, oh, Garen Crownguard taking on the dragon. Yeah, swinging the sword, jumping up, rah, rah, rah. And then, of course, we have this glorious golden light. And then the dragon kicks his ass, and we're back into the still slightly golden, but much more natural light. And the same thing, of course, happens to the girl as she charges into her fantasy. Same golden, glorious light with Fiora literally outlined against, like, golden rays from the skies as she charges. Oh, no. Wait, no. That didn't work either. And so the reason I bring that up is because take note of Garen and Fiora find them, and then Fiora starts telling them the terrifying story of the painful death that they will all surely suffer on the battlefield. And take note of what happens to the light. Take note of what happens to the color. Yeah, there's still a bit of that golden light there, but oh, wow. First of all, the darkness is encroaching on the story because our heroes are at their lowest point, like they're in danger of being beaten by this giant dragon. And Fiora is literally introducing darkness to the story. But even then, the light that illuminates these characters, the light that they're actually under, is much closer to the natural light that's been present in the real life scenes, which tells us, like, on just the level of color, that this is not a fantasy story. This is not a glorified fantasy. This is not glory. This is reality, or at least a story that's a lot closer to reality than what the kids were imagining. And all of that is being accomplished, like, basically just through a little bit of a shift in color and a little bit of a shift in how the light interacts with the scene, which is just good storytelling. And especially because here at the end, when Fiora rises to her own crescendo, when she ascends into the realm of glorious fantasy, the golden light comes back just a little bit. Like, not dominating the scene, but there's just that little bit of it, illuminating the both of them as they charge towards the dragon in this glorious final charge. Just a little bit of it comes back, because Fiora is allowing a little bit of that excitement to enter her mind as well, her fantasy as well, which it's good. Like, that's good. I like that. I like when you use, like, the complete control that you can have an animation over the scene to do that kind of thing. Anyway, back to character animation. I said to myself, no, I don't want to discuss, like, oh, color and framing and stuff. I want to discuss just the character animation, so make it different from the Legends of Runeterra reveal video. But no, I couldn't help myself. Anyway, the kids. So, very subtle little thing about the body language here. They're looking at their idols battling somewhere down here. Notice what's happening to his body language as he looks. He's leaning forward. Like, he's like, oh, they're so cool. I want to be so much like them. Yeah, swords. Yeah, hero stuff. Yeah. He's rising into the frame. His eyes are like lighting up, getting a little bit wider. Like, he's like, oh, he's so. And then there's the girl who's like, she's definitely interested. She's definitely excited. But her body language is, ooh, shrinking back a little bit. So the character design is doing a ton of work in telling us that in establishing the contrast between the two. He's got black hair, she's got bright hair, he's got dark eyes, she's got bright eyes, so on. He's got blue, she's got white, so on and so on. But this tiny little bit of character acting right at the start also tells us, there it is, there's their personalities, that's their dynamic as a pair, is that he's adventurous and boisterous and won't take no for an answer, and she's a little bit more careful and cautious and a little bit more scared of getting caught. Just all of that, just from that little difference in movement, which I just think, ooh, it's good. I get excited by that. I also like, I like that the girl has, like, I like that she has a bit of an overbite. I don't know, this is a weird thing, but, like, characters with, like, visible, like, overbites and stuff like that, I feel like they're kind of rare in animation, especially in fantasy animation. Like, there's so many possible things that a human face can do, so many possible anatomies that it can have, and a lot of the time we kind of default to not using most of them, and a visible overbite is one of those, but it gives her face so much character. Like, she's so cute. Look at her. And the same thing with, like, the kid who has these very sharp, defined cheekbones that gives his face this kind of angular look, which again helps differentiate him from the much more rounded and softer look on his female counterpart. Like, these little anatomy things in character design that I feel like just aren't used enough in a lot of animation. It's nice to see them present. And I like the... Here's a little touch. Notice the way that he's lifting the sword, right? Like, he strolls up to it. He's like, yeah, totally. I'm just swing the sword around. Like, I'm so cool. Yeah, totally. I'm gonna swing the sword around. Like, he keeps the confident air. He doesn't, like, realize that he's screwed up or anything, but it's like, it's just reality resisting him just that little bit where it's like, you can see him struggling to lift the blade. Because, of course, like, as being a kid, he's also struggling to lift the responsibility and the fantasy of being a great hero, yada, yada, yada. Lifting a heavy sword or pulling a sword out of a stone is, like, the oldest metaphor for, like, assuming power and responsibility in Western canon, I think. But I just love the little bit of contrast between the, like the swagger that he's got walking up to it, and then that, like, as he tries to lift it and pull it along. And also, like, the slight awkward, like, again, like, when you want to communicate the weight of an object in character animation, you have to constantly keep in your head as an animator, like, okay, what's the weight relationship between the character and the thing that they are handling? Like, if he swings this sword around, what does that do to the momentum of his body? What does that do to his balance? How does he... And so you see that when he's lifting the sword up, one of the ways we can see he's struggling a little bit with it is that he's leaning back. He's trying to change his center of gravity to kind of lever the sword up over his head. And you can see here when the sword passes that point, like when the sword's center of gravity shifts, all of a sudden that weight goes woof and pulls him down, and you can see he has to catch himself not to fall over. Which is just the little stuff, but it helps. In terms of character animation, it gives you the relationship between the character and the object, and the relationship is he has a little bit of trouble lifting this thing. He's not quite strong enough. He's not quite there yet, which is what makes it, like, which is an important moment, because then Garen comes along, of course. And this sword is literally a twig to him. And he can actually lift the sword. And a human person... all in the same go. And again, we get that that relationship between the character and the object. Because Garen is like, he just lifts a person up, no problem, dangles him above the ground, and then he lets go, and he can't hold the weapon up by himself. Like, with two hands, it still bounces down on the ground. The weight relationship between them, again, being shown beautifully in the character animation. Just, oh, good stuff. And the thing that led me to go on that tangent is this little move right here. Notice he wants to hit this thing, right? So you see first his attention, his head twists. Oh, hey, there's a thing there. He brings the weapon around, and then it's like, and you can see as the sword starts to dip over here, he has to lower his entire weight onto that leg and kind of, his whole body's kind of sagging a little bit in order to get the strength and momentum to bring the weapon forward. Which again, like the relationship is so nice. Like, oh, good. And in terms of the environment design, by the way, I wouldn't be surprised if we're dealing with a mix of 2D and 3D assets here. Because the whole thing has this, it doesn't have quite the painting aesthetic that the launch trailer for Legends of Runeterra had, but it certainly has this fantasy illustration come to life aesthetic thing going on. That Riot seemed to be working very hard into this sort of official aesthetic of League of Legends, which I approve of, and which is also very much part of the aesthetic of Legends of Runeterra itself. And as far as I can make out, and it can be hard to tell, I think stuff like the barrel with the swords here, and the punching bag, and the background stuff, I think that's all 2D painted. And then layered into a three-dimensional scene. Because one thing I notice is that in scenes like this, for example, the camera doesn't swing around in any way that would require the space to deform in order to keep visual consistency. So I don't think this is 3D modeled. I think those are 2D illustrations, which is it's fairly common as far as I know. And I think the same thing is true. Like this, for example, because this thing needs to move, this is probably 3D modeled, but the stuff in the background here, the dragon model that the kid gets excited by, all of this, I would imagine, is probably a 2D illustration, probably layered on many different layers so that they can move a little bit independently of each other. But other than that, yeah. So this is the dragon model that the kid his imagination is being activated by. And again, body language. The kid, he can't hold the sword up casually, so he has to let it rest on the ground. And so he kind of drags it behind him like that. And again, that other little detail where, like, he's interested in this thing draws him towards it, he's drawn to it, so his weight is slowly shifting onto his front leg with his back leg slowly lifting. Take a look. You see that, like, how the heel is just very gently raising off the ground as he's pulled towards this object of his interest. And then the girl comes in, and her body language, where he's all straight back, chin forward, looking up. She's looking down, loping forward, like she's kind of trying to sneak. She's careful, she's uncertain. And again, the body language tells the story of the relationship. And she's adorable too. Like, I love that. I love those buck teeth. Like that little slightly buck tooth look. It's very good. But you also instantly, hey, she's wearing a shield on her arm. Who is she trying to imitate? I wonder. Who could she possibly be trying to look like she's kind of similar? Oh, And the same thing with the kid and his outfit, obviously. It's like, that's very similar to the kind of outfit that Garen wears. So there's a visual affinity being established even before we know that this is really about Garen and Fiona. There's a visual affinity being established between the boy and Garen and the girl and Fiora. Some lovely speech animation, too. Because the kid is now trying to pretend to be Garen, right? So it's like the arm up and the chest out, and it's like, I am Garen Crownguard. And like keeping the face very still and speaking authoritatively, like a Garen does. Yeah, there's good stuff here. And also, like, the little details, like, watch the girl's hand here. As the boy speaks, as he gets more and more into his fantasy, as he starts playing, she untenses just a little bit. She unclenches and becomes less uncertain. And then she smiles. Because now, oh, we're playing. Like, she's letting go of fear a little bit. So, nice little... so here's a thing in film theory, which is not my specialist subject, but here's a thing in film theory. It's called affinity of continuum of movement, I think. Affinity and contrast. And basically what it means is that from one cut to another, you have... Garen is approximately here on the screen, right? And he's moving left to right towards the dragon, spinning around in a clockwise direction, as it were, with his sword. Now, when we cut to the boy, he's in the same position on screen, but he's spinning back in a counterclockwise direction, the opposite. Or is it the opposite? Yeah, it's the opposite. The opposite direction of what Garen was doing because he's being knocked back. Which is what makes this such a good cut, because you instantly understand the identification that, oh yeah, the boy and Garen are supposed to be the same because the boy is pretending to be him, so when he gets knocked out of it. So the visual storytelling there tells you instantly, and it's the same thing they do here. The boy starts running from left to right, we go into the flash of light, and then we cut to Garen, who's also running from left to right. So there's affinity of continuum of movement, is I believe what that's called in film theory. Which is being used here to allow some like rather rapid cuts where you don't, like, you immediately understand that we're cutting to a fantasy scene. Like, the moment it happens, you understand, oh, it's a fantasy scene, he's imagining himself as Garen, and the moment we cut back, we understand that, oh, he got knocked out of the fantasy quite literally. What knocked him out of the fantasy? Well, this thing spinning in the background right here. And that's using the language of film in order to ensure that that is clear to the audience, that they're not confusing guy, hey, why are we on a bridge all of a sudden? Who's that guy? I don't know what's going on. No, because the language of film is being used to tell the story very efficiently. Ba-boom. So, second thing being introduced here, that smoke, that little dust cloud as the kid lands. Gadonk. Get wrecked, kid. That smoke cloud, I believe, is hand animated. I believe that is hand animated in 2D, if I'm not mistaken. And that is also, I think it's also present with the dragon. Yeah, the smoke that's coming out of the dragon's mouth, to me, also looks hand animated. And it's animated on 2s. Now, if you watched my Legends of Runeterra announcement trailer video, we talked about this extensively, about the principle of animating things at different frame rates in 3D animation in order to mimic the look of something that is 2D animated. And what you'll often see is that in a short like this one, the 3D animation runs on what is animated on 1s. As you can see here, like every frame, something moves in the 3D space, and it moves with the same speed and at the same timing, more or less. Or, like, it moves with the same timing, not the same speed. But if you take a look at these plumes of smoke down here, for example, you can see from frame to frame, they don't change. They don't change at all. But then they change, and then they don't change, and then they change, and then they don't change, and then they change, and then they don't change. And that's what adds to the hand-animated look of the light and smoke effects that's going on here. And I believe for, like, I'm reasonably sure the characters are at all times animated on 1s. Like, they move on every single frame. I'm reasonably sure that's true. So, back to body language. Because the kid gets knocked out. he gets his ass handed to him. And she thinks that's quite funny. And notice how her body language shifts, because now all of her insecurity is gone. She's not scared anymore at all. She's having fun with her friend. And so, hands on the hips, confident body posture. She's literally talking down to him because he got his ass handed to him. And then that smile, like that right there, that's such a good smile. Lights up her face, and you can see that she too, she rolls her eyes at him like, oh, you're so silly. And then it's like, yeah, but I want to play too, though. You can see the same idea enters her head, like she's rolling her eyes at him, and then it's like, but it seemed like fun, though. Like, I mean, we could also, right? And here again, film language is being used. The focus shifts from the girl to the weapon, the thing that she's looking at. And you can see, even through the blur, you can see how the smile spreads across her face a little bit more. And she gets excited as well. It's so good. Like, it's basic, but I love little things like that. Like, animators are actors. Like, character animators are actors. That's kind of the way you... that's something that when I learned that, kind of revealed animation to me in a lot of ways, is that every choice a character makes on screen, every little movement of their body, every twitch of a hair, every body language decision that they make is a decision that's being made by proxy by an animator who's acting out the character. Not through necessarily movement of their body, although animators will often act out scenes to take visual reference that they can then use to animate from, but by putting themselves, like, imagining themselves in this person's flesh and being like, okay, how would this character move? And so the thing that excites me about these little performances, like those little touches, like the hand unclenching when she stops being nervous, is the knowledge that that's a person figuring that out, like thinking, oh, hey, like if I was in this situation, if I was this girl and I was nervous about being in a place I wasn't supposed to be, but then my friend starts playing this fun game and I just can't help but get excited by it a little bit, my hand would unclench a little. Like, those, I love that. I think that's so cool. Which is why I get so excited by it. Like, I know it probably seems like a small and kind of silly thing to get excited by, but it's those little things that makes animation so cool to me, is watching someone else enter an understanding of a character's, like, who they are, how they move, how they think, how they behave, how their body language works. Like, I have to imagine that whoever animated this girl wasn't like a 12-year-old girl who lives in a fantasy world. It's a real human person who's probably an adult. So it's an act of empathy. Like, it's an act of being empathizing with the character that you're animating, understanding how they feel, and expressing it authentically, which makes good character animation good, like really good, in my opinion. This is not like a gospel thing. It's just my opinion. And again, body language, because now she's not herself anymore. Now, here comes the second layer of artifice, right? Because first of all, we have an animator pretending to be a little girl through animation as acting, and then we have the animator pretending to be the little girl, pretending to be Fiora, again through animation. So the animator now has to think, okay, if this girl was trying to imitate Fiora and pretend to be like her, but not quite like her, what would that look like? And the answer is this. Look at the flourishes she's making. It's like she's just kind of wiggling and waving the sword around. Not to any purpose, but because, like, that's the Fiora thing. And then there's this excellent little move. When she fully enters the fantasy, like when she becomes Fiora Laurent, hero of Demacia. Wait. I love that little, it's that she gets just that little bit taller. You see that? As she swings the sword down, she goes up on her toes because Fiora is always wearing heels. And so she becomes taller just for a second. She becomes a little taller in the fantasy of being like her hero, which that's what it feels like to play as a kid, right? Like when you really imagine yourself as the cool hero, it feels like you're a little taller, doesn't it? And again, cut on movement, where Fiora is doing the same movement in the cut as the girl is doing. So we've already established that we're switching between a fantasy scene and a real scene with the color theory and with the boy who's already established the scene. So it needs even less explanation here, but they're still being careful to do it. And then Fiora doing this ridiculously impossible move that doesn't kind of seem like the thing a fencer would do, because of course this is fantasy and she's having fun. And then the little detail, like eyes on the target, eyes on the target, eyes on the, oh no, I f***ed up. And again, the weight, look at it. Look how, like, he's raising the sword up, and his whole body falls backwards as he's struggling to cope with the weight of the sword. And the dragon itself, by the way, lovely piece of animation. Look at its neck, especially. Look at this. Look how it twists and turns and how the weight moves. kind of slowly along with it. You can see how, like, the front of the head moves over first, and then the jaw follows. And that kind of slow swinging of the body gives you a real sense of the weight of the creature. It looks big and heavy just in the way that it moves around. Here's a good face. When you finally get that lethal. Hits it in the eye. Uh-oh. And again, notice the timing. Smoke clouds animated on a different timing than the main 3D animation, which gives it that slightly cartoony look compared to what's going on with the rest of the animation. Bonk. And I love this. I love here that they do the cut on, like, Garen gets owned, and then his sword bounces into the screen, and then we cut on the sword. Going from the sword coming towards us, Garen's sword, to the training sword, bouncing back towards the kid. Bonk! Again, eyes. That's something that's always worth doing, like when you're looking at character animation. Look at what the animator does with the eyes. Because the girl notices, and the boy notices, and the jaw drops. And the music here gets just a little bit sinister. Like Garen enters in shadow, like kind of almost as a scary, frightening figure. And then we see the man himself. And by the way, has Garen lost some weight? Like, is that just me? Because the last time we saw him, that was in the Lux Garen Silas short, and in that one he looked like this, thick boy, like lots of chunk around that midriff, very large boots, big shoulder pads. This Garen is a little bit of a leaner character, isn't he? He's also had a very different haircut. Like, this guy looks like he lives in a college dorm and only ever plays football. This guy looks like he has a hairdresser. So I don't know. I guess the two studios had different ideas of what he's supposed to be and look like, but that's fine. Like, maybe that's a subject for a different video. And also, like, again, talking about the weight, the sword, which has been established as very heavy, but Garen treats it, whoop, he just throws it around, like, with ease and with confidence. This is a good frame, too, because he's extending what he's doing when he picks up the training sword, and then he offers the hilt to the kid. And the gesture there is, hey, I'm giving you permission to do, like, I'm giving you permission for the fantasy. Like, because the kids, so far, have been doing something that they're not supposed to. But then Garen, like, hey, good. Like, yes, play that fantasy, do that practice. There's no condemnation, there's no anger, there's no, oh, what are you kids doing? None of that. And again, that is being communicated in a very simple gesture, which is just that he's like, hey, take the sword back, kid. Keep playing. It's that a little bit of approval, which is also why the boy enthusiastically grabs it and gets pulled up on his feet. And again, note the eyes. Looking at Fiora. Fiora offers her hand. Then we're looking at the hand, and it's like, oh, she's offering me her hand? And look, this is a little tiny thing, but look how the lower eyelids raise up a little bit. Like, they tense up, they raise just a little bit, they tense a little bit. Just that little gesture of happiness that you can get from the lower eyelid. And I like Fiora's posture here, because she's looking at the kid, yeah, but she can't help but keep her chin high. Like, that's part of her character acting, is that she's always got her chin up a little bit. Ah, wait, I'm a Laurent, I've always got my chin up, wait, because of the pride of the warrior. No, no, I'm French. She's got that chin up thing, and Garen doesn't have that. Garen is, like, he still has that confident posture and stuff, but he doesn't have that chin up, like, prideful chin forward kind of thing. That's Fiora. And again, that's the character acting, doing the work of establishing the contrast between the characters. Is like Fiora has that chin up, that prideful demeanor, that prideful way of carrying herself. And Garen is just a little bit more casual. He's just a little bit more relaxed about things. I like that. I like that little twirl. Like, Fiora comes in with a swipe, and then... And by the way, lovely animation smears here. Very cartoony. I like that. And then, like, you can see how, because she leaps into, she lands on her foot here, leaps into the swipe, and then the second leg comes up and leads her around into this swing about. And look how she lands there, transfers her weight to that leg, and you can see her momentum is going this way from left to right, but then she manages to pivot it back for another stab, a literal stab at the dragon. And I like the way that, like, you can see how she steps into it with all of her body weight fully into the thrust, which makes it look really nice. And here comes a lovely bit of smoke animation. Because here, like, we need to communicate the wind pressure or the shockwave that throws Garen and Fiora back, and the smoke and the, you can see the wave that comes at you right here is doing the work of that. Like, the smoke flaring up into our screens, obscuring everything, is doing the work of really communicating the power of that hit. And I like this dragon model. Like, I have to imagine they didn't make that dragon model just for this. Here's a little thing. As Garen is getting up, like raising himself up, he's literally raising himself up with the sword. The sword, again, we have established that the sword is the symbol of that, like the responsibility and the power and the strength and the glory of the soldier. And he pushes himself up with it, like as he uses it as a tool. But notice how, again, the eyes. He never looks down. He never looks defeated. He never looks like he's really struggling. He looks like it's tough, but he never feels defeated because his head is always up. He's always looking at the opponent that he's fighting. He's got his eyes on the prize, right? Which, again, is that little thing about body language to really communicate, like, that he's determined. He's not down and out. He just got knocked over for a second, but he's ready to keep fighting. And by the way, we get that here, right? Like, that they just need to look at each other, and then they do a nod, and then they both know exactly what to do. And as Fiora, like, okay, I know what he's about to do. I'm going to smile and look at him do it, and then I'm going to follow, because I am Fiora. And this lovely tableau. And here you can really see the effect of, like, it's just one of the best places to see the effect of, like, animating the smoke as though it's a cartoon, while letting the characters be rendered by, like, on ones by the 3D animation. Look at the contrast in movement between the smoke and the movement of the dragon. Like, there's that little difference in timing that just, it creates a really nice feeling. Like, I think it looks so cool, like, to have that 2D, 3D combination. Anyway, Kit, you're gonna die. How do you feel about it? Well, their faces say it all, don't they? The little twitches. And here again, a character animation decision. You could very easily have the kid be like, "Oh my god, that was Garen," and be jumping around and doing excited stuff. But what we need here is a little bit of a comedy beat. We need to communicate exactly how dumbstruck these kids are by having been encountered their idols, so the movement is very, very subtle. The girl, all she really does is she kind of slumps down a little bit. She twists her head just a tiny little bit. Whereas the kid does pretty much absolutely nothing until he lets go of the sword. And yeah, at the end of it, pretty much all we get is the scene of the dragon landing. And that creates an interesting little... Because were the kids imagining this fight with the dragon on this bridge, which is like in the kids' fantasy, Garen and Fiora are fighting the dragon on the bridge? Or did they predict it? Or were we flashing forward in time to Fiora and Garen actually fighting the dragon? Weird questions. I don't know why you would ask those questions at the end of the short, except as a funny little stinger for people who overthink things to think about. I don't know anyone like that, though. I don't know anyone who overthinks 2.5 minute animated shorts for 45 minutes at a time. I mean, maybe you know someone like that, but I've never met a weirdo like that in my life. And that's the end of it. I hope Riot give me at least a week before they release the next one, because while I genuinely very much enjoy this, and I look forward to seeing what they have planned for the other regions, I really hope for a Yordle-focused one. I really hope for that. I would like a little more time to do other stuff in the meantime as well. Anyway, was that it? Yes, I think that's it. If you've enjoyed this, right, I'm supposed to advertise things to you. If you've enjoyed this, I have a comment button and a like button and a subscribe button down below and a bell icon. And if you want to hit like one of those, that would be good, because YouTube tracks how many people hit those buttons, and however many people hit those buttons, like that's the engagement, air quotes, that the video is producing, which is what determines whether or not YouTube decides to show this video to, you know, other people. Which, I mean, I don't know, it's nice when my videos get seen like that. I don't do this just for views, but I do it at least partly for views. So if you want to help me out there, that would be nice. I also have a Patreon, a merchandise store, and a tip jar. And if you want to avail yourself of any of those, I would be very grateful for the help. And if you don't want to, that's completely fine as well. Although at the end of my videos, I do try to, generally speaking, if there is online content that you enjoy, and if there are content creators whose work you enjoy, please consider supporting them directly with anything you can, whenever you can. Like, whether it's me or someone else. Because especially in times of crisis like this, that we're in right now, advertisers will be pulling their advertisement from online platforms, and so for online content creators, direct support from their audiences becomes more important than ever. So if you're able to do that, and if you want to, I would highly encourage you to do that. And if not, honestly, just watch the videos, maybe hit a like button every once in a while. That is going to be enough. Last thing I have to advertise. I have a second channel. I do Let's Plays over there. I have played a bunch of Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy 6, 7, and currently going through Final Fantasy 8. We are going to be doing Ori and the Blind Forest, as well as Journey over there. And also maybe the Final Fantasy 7 remake once that comes out. I'm going to stream that on the main channel to start with. And then we'll switch that over probably to streaming on the second channel, because YouTube punishes you for streaming too much from a main channel because of, again, algorithm stuff. Please like, comment, and subscribe. So that, yes, that's all of it. I have advertised all of the things to you. You may now close down this video, but before you do, please do remember to wash your hands, or do it after you close down the video. Like, maybe it's easier to close down the video when your hands aren't full of soapy water. I don't want to tell you how to live your life, but thanks for watching.